scary situation unfolding as Donald Trump visits the border in Cochise, Arizona. There is an intense manhunt underway right now for a man who they believe has made threats against the former president. Now, it comes a little over a month since the assassination attempt on Trump's life. Despite the danger, Donald Trump went ahead with his event and commented on the manhunt, saying this.
I have to do my job. It's a job. It's a dangerous job, but I have to do my job. This is so sad, but this border is so dangerous. It's so bad and so horrible to people. They're losing children, wives and husbands, and it's just a horrible thing. And we can stop it.
Judge, maybe could you talk a little bit about the threat and then what it's like for Secret Service now under even more pressure to make sure that he's protected and that the other candidates are protected as well?
Well, look, the Secret Service, and unfortunately, we've had a very bad experience with Kim Cheadle at the head of the Secret Service. And to be honest with you, I'm not that impressed with the acting director, Rowe. But the Secret Service is always supposed to be on guard and prepared that someone is out there and ready to kill the president of the United States. I mean, that is their job. And so now we have a name and a face, and we're going to deal with the ramping up of all of the assets to make sure that they find this individual and that they afford Donald Trump now the same security that they would give to actually a sitting president. And you can bet that all of law enforcement, all intelligence assets are turned on to find this guy, both overt, which is, you know, informed presence, and covert, which is Secret Service and what they do internally. It's also a good bet that this will not end well for this guy on the right of the screen. However, this will not be the last time that someone comes out of the woodwork to harm Donald Trump. But this guy is dumb enough to tell everybody ahead of time, and now we know who he is. But I have to say one more thing, Dana. You know, there's a lot of talk in this race about testosterone and masculinity and all this nonsense. I've never seen anyone like Donald Trump, irrespective of my personal feelings for him, and you know that he's my friend. I mean, you get up after you're shot and you yell fight, and this guy's going out again knowing that there are people who want to kill him, and knowing that even with Secret Service protection in Butler County in Pennsylvania, this punk almost got away with it.
Yeah, and that investigation is ongoing, and they do have now bulletproof glass in order to protect the president. Right. Greg, one of the things he did down there today is had angel parents there, families whose loved ones were murdered by illegal immigrants who have crossed the border. And what he was doing is basically drawing a straight line from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden to these tragedies. How do you think it went?
Well, first, we got to remind people, the people who make public threats aren't the ones who do the deed. I wish it were that simple. It's, you know, the people intent on assassinations never tell you first. It's not like Babe Ruth, you know, pointing to the bleachers and saying, I'm going to hit a homer. You know, as somebody who's gotten a fair share of threats, you know, the only one that took actual steps never told me ahead of time, which was really rude. So, okay, about Trump's presser down there. So it makes me think, what's worse? Trump coming down that escalator in 2015 and offending the sensibilities of the virtue signaling media, or the crimes, the rapes and the murders that he accurately warned us about? You know, when Trump said, and you might say, oh, it was inartful, has proved correct. And it wasn't a political statement. It was a statement based on common sense, that if you open the floodgates and let in millions of people, there are bound to be bad hombres. There's bound to be a bad skittle in the bunch, rapists and murderers. If you had listened to him and not let your emotions about how he says things and how his tweets offend you, he would have been able to fix this, and there would be people alive today that aren't.
Jesse, one of the things that the Trump War Room Twitter account, or X account, sorry, said today was that he said that I met with Kamala's transition team. I told her transition team exactly what would happen if they got rid of President Trump's policies. We suggested policies to her within the parameters, and she refused to listen. Kamala's border invasion was a policy choice. And listen to Chris Murphy. He's the senator, I believe, Connecticut. Am I right?
Yes.
I hope I'm right. This is what he said about Kamala here.
Kamala Harris has been tough as nails when it comes to securing our border.
When Donald Trump comes down to Texas, stands next to officers in uniforms just like mine, he's not there to help us. Don't think that, not for a second. He is a self-serving man. Now, Kamala, on the other hand, has been fighting border crime for years.
I did about an hour of that last night here on the floor, Jesse.
No one believes that, Dana. No one believes that. That's just in one ear and out the other. Just because some guy has a hat on and says she's tough, that doesn't make her tough. Trump runs towards problems. Kamala runs away. If you can't obey orders, you can't lead. She was given an order to fix the border, and she didn't do it. She's not really that hard of a worker. Trump is. Look at the way he symbolically does these events. He goes to the border to talk about the invasion. He has a grocery summit with items to talk prices. He goes to the inner city to talk about crime. And then you'll see him at a UFC event or a Formula One race. I guarantee you're going to see him at a college football game this fall. What this does is forces the media to project these images into people's homes and phones. When you give the media images, you know, we're all lazy. We take it, we put it out there. That's great. That's what television is. If Kamala is just going to do small events and no interviews, that's not going to hack it. Trump is going to be able to overwhelm her with a variety of images that symbolically suggest that he's in this to win this and is fighting for you. Kamala really needs to step up her game here.
Harold Ford Jr. give you the final word on the border and on the manhunt or on the border policy.
Let's just say two quick things. President Trump, I thought his words about this manhunt were so presidential, and anyone that believes we should bring harm to any president, there should be action taken against him. But he said, I've heard it's dangerous, but I also have a job to do. I have great respect for the Secret Service, and I hope they continue to do their job well in the way that he thinks they should. On this border thing, look, I think that both of these candidates have some shortcomings. I think President Trump is going to have to answer at that debate, and I'm curious to hear his answer, if indeed all the media reports are right that he worked actively against the bipartisan bill that was created, and if he did, why so? And I think she's going to have to answer. What's the difference between being responsible for looking at root causes of the challenges at our border and being the border czar? And the country will have an opportunity to decide whom they believe most or who they think is the most credible. I know I'll be looking forward to it. I have an opinion on it, but I'm looking forward to how the country reacts.
Jesse, the polls show that President Trump is way trusted more on the border than anything else. Do you trust that poll?
That's the poll I trust.
Okay, I want to make sure.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.